Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I'm your host, Mary Katharine Ham, and with my co-host, Vic Matus of the Free Beacon, we got a lot going on, not just in real life, but in the news. We got staffers protesting outside the White House, their own White House. We have the mayor of Boston with a very special invitation. Some more news out of the Ivy Leagues. But before we get to all that, and Washington is just going down the tubes. We're going to get to all of that. But before that, Vic, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mary Katharine. Let me tell you why. I recently saw an ad for Walmart that featured some of the stars of Mean Girls, one of my favorite movies. Have you seen this commercial for
No,
Walmart?
I haven't, but I'm sure this is going to be some cultural signifier of how old I am at this point that this is being used.
Yes, they're going after you and me. Well, really you. Because, as a guy, I'm just watching this from a distance and enjoying it for what the quality of the commercial, really. So Walmart put together a series of ads and clips featuring Lindsay Lohan, Amanda Seyfried, and Lacey Chabert. Now, Rachel McAdams, I guess she was too busy. I haven't seen Lindsay Lohan on the commercials. I saw her on the clips. Amanda Seyfried and Lacey Chabert, I saw her. Saw them both in the commercial. They're playing their characters from Mean Girls, an amazing movie. If you have not watched it,
it's a wonderful movie. It really hits on all cylinders.
Yes, everything. Right, and there's not really any dull moments in it.
No,
and it's just
not for you.
It's great to watch. Yes, I saw that movie in the theater with Matt Labash. Funny enough, I think he was writing on it. That's why, and
of course,
yes, and I heard secondhand that he did not mind watching the movie with me, except for I make a lot of noises. But it's just like, something like that. I don't remember. But I just want to say this. In the clips, the little shorts that they did for Walmart, Lacey Chabert, whose character was Gretchen Wiener, in the end of the movie Mean Girls, she ends up becoming sort of the queen bee for the Vietnamese clique.
Right.
And in this movie, and in these scenes now, because we're fast forward to the future, I don't want to know how many years it's been since Mean Girls, by the way. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. She now has children. And here's the best part. The children are Asian. And
That's
so,
great.
I've been a fan of Lacey Chabert since Party of Five. No, not in that way, because she was a child. And at Party of Five, I love Jennifer Love Hewitt.
Yes,
that was my favorite from Party of Five. But Lacey Chabert, she's very smart, the actress. She's conservative. I don't know if you know this. She's conservative. And she does a lot of those Hallmark movies.
She does.
She's a Hallmark regular. So then I started to put it all together. I said, oh my goodness. Here's this woman, this woman, she's this actress. She's beautiful, she's conservative, and she's into Asian men. And then I realized I described my wife. You like where I was going with that? Huh?
So beautiful.
I surprised you and her.
It was a Christmas miracle that one.
Yes, I sure hope she didn't turn off the show and then filed for divorce. So, Mary Katharine, how are you? I want to know where you've been, but also you're beginning to sound a little bit like Kathleen Turner. What's happening?
I know, right?
Listeners are going to love this show.
Yeah, this is a bit of a warning that this may be a shortened show, depending on how this voice is working out, because I am losing it. There's, it's the holiday season and I have lots of children and they have lots of various germs. And yes, I have now caught one of them. Look, I held out for a long time. There have been some sniffles in this house for a long time.
No,
I have not been
considering all the children in your house.
Yes.
Yeah, it's impressive.
So now I was like last man standing and I finally got something. So I'm working on it. I just want to say that Rachel McAdams not showing up for these shorts or in these advertisements. Yeah. I don't love that. I wish she was there. And maybe the premise is that the actual Regina George would not be into coming back either. But you said maybe she's too busy and maybe she's too big time. But Seyfried got extremely big time.
Yeah.
After Mean Girls, so it would seem that McAdams could show up too.
Anyway, let me just say, by the way, they look so good.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. You can't see my face, the listeners can't, but I'm like, they look like they have barely aged.
Perhaps it's just my age of woman that is really holding up.
Holding up.
So I was in New Jersey. I was in your homeland.
Oh.
Yes,
whereabouts, if we may ask, whereabouts?
I was in Fairfield.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's all the way up north. Yes.
So I was in Fairfield. I went into the Newark Penn Station, which I
Oh,
have never gotten off at before. I've always gone through to over
neither have
Newark.
I.
But
Yeah.
Newark Penn Station, I wasn't expecting it to be like it's an old railway station, kind of pretty
Ah,
inside.
wow.
It has the old signs, the old fonts, like the pretty, it hasn't
Yeah,
been it's like it probably is just that Newark went so far past the time when they would modernize it that it just like
yeah.
never happened. And so now it still has the wooden benches and
Wow.
it, yeah, I
It
it was
sounds like
nice.
a very Jersey pork barrel project, where they stick that onto some bill about refurbishing the Frank Lautenberg train station. And I think one of those
Maybe so.
stations is known as the Frank Lautenberg train station. I'm not sure if it's that one or if it's in Sea Caucus or wherever, but do tell.
Well, it was very pretty. And then I
Yeah.
got there and I was very hungry. And as you do in New Jersey, even in the train station, I was like, look, there's a pizza place right outside my train. I'm very hungry. What are the chances that this slice of pizza is going to be good? Now, in any other train station, not great
Right.
chances, but it's New Jersey. So I bought my $4 slice and it was delicious, Vic. It was
Oh,
now
yes.
I
Oh,
don't know if it's
yes.
because I was so hungry. That
Mm.
might have been part of it.
No.
But also, it's it was like just the perfect amount of
Balance.
crispy and chewy. How did they
Yes.
do
Yes.
that?
How do they do it? Largely, it's water. It's also they're within the proximity of, if you picture New York and then within New York, I think it's the Bronx that is the sort of the epicenter
Yeah.
of real amazing pizza. I know our friend Sonny Bunch would say that the answer is Sbarro's, but let's not
Right, of course.
entertain his foolishness. But the epicenter is, like the Bronx, and it emanates out from there. So you'll get decent-ish pizza in Connecticut, though it morphed into its own thing, and New Jersey, and you were in North Jersey
Mhm.
specifically, so that will have very good pizza. Even where I am in Toms River, it's still very good. Water is part of it, and the other thing is there's a real emphasis on a sweetness to the sauce, I think,
Yeah.
and the cheese is really great too, obviously, and as you mentioned, it's not completely mush, it's not too
No.
hard, it's just right.
It's remarkable, and I thought, "You know what? This is probably a middling piece of pizza
Oh, yeah,
in New Jersey,"
sure.
but it was fantastic. So
Yeah.
congratulations to your people.
Thank you.
And then I
On
went
their
over
behalf.
then I went over to give a speech at a gathering of there's a group called Jersey First that does conservative, fiscally conservative and messaging and work and education freedom in the state of New Jersey. And so I went up to give a speech at their gathering, and it was very nice. And I didn't know
Excellent.
where I was going. I knew the address, but I didn't know where I was going until I just put the address in the Uber. And we drive over and we get there, and it's sort of like in a like sort of an office park ish kind of thing.
Okay.
And the driver, knowing that he has let's be generous, a young lady in the back of his car is like, do you know exactly where I'm dropping you? He doesn't want to drop me just in a random parking lot. And I said, no, I don't actually. But let's like creep up a little bit and see if we can figure out where the opening of this, where the door to this place is, because it doesn't look like there's an obvious
Right.
door. So we pull up a little bit and we both look to my left and we see this palatial garage with beautiful exotic car after beautiful exotic car
Well,
parked
Fairfield,
in
sure.
it. And just like McLarens and Porsche speedsters and all the things from modern to classic.
Yeah. Oh my
There was a
goodness.
Chevy Bel Air in there. It was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I did have then also there's like Italian food cooking upstairs, and it's like wafting out. Yes, and the Uber driver goes, "What kind of place is this?" And I said, "I think it's Jersey."
You did? Did you really say that?
Yes,
Did he laugh?
yes.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe you could have been in Jay Leno's home. I don't know,
No, so
it sounds
it was like a car it's like a car aficionado club, and a lot of them
Oh.
store cars there,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's a private club where this was being held, and I make a little bit of a chop shop Goodfellas joke, in my speech? Yes, I did.
That's right. Some of them actually belong to the people there.
So, I'm taking notes, that's good, Vic.
Yeah, I think you can use that again.
Anyway, so that's what I did, and then I got up and I came right back home, and here I am, trying to preserve my voice.
Very nice. I'm
Yes.
glad you had a very pleasant trip to the Garden State.
It was lovely, and my hosts were great. Good job, Jersey First, working on all that, even in a even in a blue state, as we understand, in the
Yeah.
very purplish state of Virginia, it's hard work. So, speaking of your people, Vic,
Yes.
were you
Oh,
invited to the mayor of Boston's Christmas party?
yes. I was thinking of going and bringing my kids, but my kids could only stay half the time. Is Yeah. Please
so,
explain to
so
everybody what
well,
happened here.
there's a little bit of a controversy, Vic.
Mm.
The Boston mayor, Michelle Wu, who's an Asian American, I believe she's born to Taiwanese parents. She had a gathering of electeds of color. So I guess you weren't eligible because you're not
No, I'm
elected.
not elected. I'm not elected.
Electeds of color from across the state. This email inviting everyone to the Christmas party for electeds of color was sent by a person who works in her office, but it was sent incorrectly to
Oh,
all the electeds, including the electeds of no color. The electeds of pallor were included on the email, and when they inquired, is there a Christmas party that we're not invited to because of our race? I said, yes,
boy.
indeed, that's correct. You were mistakenly sent this invitation, and it is now rescinded. They
Wow.
rescinded their invitation.
How do they determine who gets to go? Like, could you be biracial and go? Or, I mean, I'm making it. Oh, I thought I was kidding, but maybe they do only let you go for the appetizers,
I don't
and then you
know.
have to leave.
And did you have to go?
Yeah. Uh, no, I mean, really, how do they determine this? Unless it's so very carefully categorized. Unless you have, do you have to have at least a parent or a grandparent who fits in a
It's
specific
like
minority?
it's like they actually have a testing
Yeah,
situation. Like
yeah,
the tribes.
yeah, I
that
believe
you
it's
have
called
to.
the Nuremberg laws for the party. This, how, there's what's the Chatham House rules they used to say when you go
Yes.
to like one of these big, confabs, these transatlantic conference, they would say Chatham House rules. Well, these are the Nuremberg Nuremberg rules. So, only if you have a quarter on the right side, then you can attend.
So
That's something.
So what's interesting about this is that she's responded to the controversy. Wu has, except she's responded by saying she said it was a mistake. You know what the mistake
Yeah.
was, Vic? The mistake was sending the email out to the wrong people.
Yes. In other words, rather than say, oops, yes, of course you're all invited, the way most people do. And if you ever were committed a faux pas of this nature, you
Mhm.
wouldn't tell the person, go out of your way to say you're not invited. And instead, well, like a lot of people these days, she just doubled down.
No, it's a real theme this week in our
It really
stories because
is.
no one's taking responsibility for things. No
And
one's
they're not going to pay a
admitting-
price because she figures, she's like, who's going to pay in Boston?
Right. Susanna Gibson's a great example from Virginia
Yeah.
who is not taking responsibility for that or admitting that it was even an issue. In this case, the email is the issue, not the fact that she's having a whites not allowed
Yes.
Christmas party. Now she says that this is a professional group that was an association that she's had for a while, and they always had an annual party. But the problem is, it's not okay to tell people of other races they can't come to your party because of their race, and B, are taxpayer funds used for any of this? Because that would be illegal, correct?
Yes. I mean, if you were obviously of another race, let's say Caucasian, and decided you were having a Caucasian only party, I don't think that would fly.
You don't think that would
even
go
though
over
what
well?
you're saying is yes. What about, I don't know, for example, Middle Easterners or, or do they count as minorities or not? Depending on Israelis, would they count? I think about, do you remember the Virginia versus Loving case, right? The
Mhm.
where it's the interracial, the white man and the black woman, and it was
Right.
a landmark case about interracial marriage in Virginia. Obviously, a very important case. There was a previous incident they mentioned that happened before, in which it was it was a black woman, but the man was Italian, and at the time in the state they weren't sure how to classify him.
Right.
So they just
Like-
let him marry her because he didn't really count as white.
Right,
So
right.
these things are kind of subjective, and I don't know. You could make this case now. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's kind of weird. So anyway, yeah, that's not a great story.
Anyway.
Look, when I grew up, there was the Filipino American, association in Ocean County,
Right.
and they had an annual Christmas party. and we would bring our non-Filipino friends.
Yeah, you,
There
you
were
weren't prohibited from
no, you could
attending.
bring people of other ethnicities. We welcome them with open arms. So this is a little bit different.
Speaking of people who aren't taking responsibility,
Hit you with the transitions.
oh man, Christmas come early when Hunter Biden decides to freelance a press conference
Yeah,
on the steps of the Capitol
yeah,
when he's supposed to be giving a deposition to the Oversight Committee. Now, he declined to do that. I think he declined to do that because it would make him under oath.
yeah. That's right.
So he is facing charges on gun stuff and tax stuff, much of which, at least the tax stuff, we learned about from whistleblowers. So that would seem to
Initially,
suggest that this is pretty valid stuff because they blew the whistle and said, hey, he should probably be charged. He had not been charged, likely due to interference and by his father or people on behalf of him to keep him out of trouble and pressure inside the
yeah.
government to keep him safe. And then lo and behold, when all that became public, once there was this outrageous plea deal they had for him, back to the drawing board. So
Keep in mind, he did get some help from Eric Swalwell, who helped him organize this press conference. Even though, of course, Swalwell is a member of Congress, but he's helping him flout that subpoena. Now,
well-known
yeah.
media genius, Eric Swalwell.
Yes, exactly. And really a friend to the Chinese people, as we know. Certain Chinese, Fang, the former friend and assistant and spy. So the interesting thing with the Hunter Biden case is the subpoena, it was his lawyer, so Abby Lowell and Hunter Biden, they do not recognize the House subpoena as being an absolute sort of, you must obey this or you will face contempt charges, because he said, this was House leadership that pushed for this inquiry. There was no official vote. It's an unofficial subpoena. So we're just going to ignore it. But of course, right after that happened, the House then voted to launch the actual formal inquiry into a possible impeachment of President Biden. So if they re-subpoena Hunter, I guess there'd be more impetus for him to show up. But if he doesn't, what are they going to do? I don't know.
I mean, it turns out, as with most things, there's always a tweet or a video. And here's Biden talking about J6 folks trying to get out of subpoenas.
What's your message to people who defy congressional subpoenas on the January 6th committee?
I hope that the committee goes after them and holds them accountable.
Should they be prosecuted by the
I
Justice
do,
Department?
yes.
They should be prosecuted.
Yeah, of course. Well, they should.
I mean, everybody's mind will change immediately. Here's Hunter Biden, and this is what he's peddling. And again, there's a theme, much like Susanna Gibson or Mayor Wu. It's all so insulting. Like that, this is the answer for your bad behavior. Here we go.
Attacked my wife, my children, my family, and my friends. They have ridiculed my struggle with addiction. They belittled my recovery. And they have tried to dehumanize me, all to embarrass and damage my father, who has devoted his entire public life to service. For 6 years, I have been the target of the unrelenting Trump attack machine.
So he's the victim.
Yes,
is the most important thing to know.
Where my wife sleeps and where my children play with their toys. A reference, that's my Godfather 2 reference. Let's also keep in mind, thanks to Andrew Weissman and those whistleblowers, he tried not to pay, close to $1 million in taxes, and instead had that money diverted to escorts and sex clubs. And do you remember, all while this is happening, he also fought against child support for his daughter, for Navy Joan, because he said he had no money.
No,
while driving a Porsche and living in a fancy house in LA.
Well, and getting his friends to fly him around on private jets and fund his paying back of his taxes and all sorts of things.
It's a little rich.
It's insulting. It's insulting. I know a lot of people didn't know that he was fighting child support for his kid. He was fighting and saying that he was not the father of this child.
Yeah.
And fought that on that front for several years before a paternity test was demanded, and it turned out he is indeed the father. At which point he continued to fight and said, "I don't have the money to pay this woman or my child, my my child that is confirmed while he was doing all that nonsense. It's true. And of course, the people who look, I think it's worth making the distinction whenever you're evaluating the behavior of public figures, or I guess he's like elected adjacent, to say, okay, well, what's just bad behavior and what's illegal? It's clear that a lot of this crossed over into illegal, but even the stuff that's not illegal, all the people who, when President Trump was doing anything, could easily say, this makes him a horrendous person, unfit for anything.
Right.
Not see it when it comes to Hunter Biden and Joe. In fact, I have a little clip of, you're going to really enjoy this one. It's an all-time classic. This is Ana Navarro on The View. Here we go. You ready for this?
No.
Joe Biden's crime is being Hunter Biden's father. And being Hunter Biden's very loving father, very good father, very supportive father. Look.
He loves him so
By the way,
much.
when did this happen? That's a recent clip that
I believe this is recent, yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was something from before, because I actually wrote down, brace for more stories about the anguish of a loving father.
Yep.
And here you are, the narrative. It continues.
Well, and I want to play a little more of her, because it gets even more outrageous. By the way, she also accuses
and there's clapping. They're clapping about this.
And she also accuses her fellow panelists of something here, which I don't quite understand what she's saying, and neither do they. But here you go. You can try to decipher it for me.
Did Hunter Biden influence peddle on his last name? Yes, he did. So did half of Washington. People sitting at this table did it. Did Hunter Biden?
They're all very confused.
Yeah.
Cheat on his taxes? Yes, he did.
Who at this table peddled on their last
I did. I'm not talking about currently.
We just wanted to clear our names.
Okay.
I was like, oh my God, do I have a claim to fame that I am not using? Sorry, continue, Anna.
Can I go back to my point, please?
Okay, so
Barbara Walters, is that who she's talking about?
I don't know what she's talking about. At any rate,
Elizabeth, what's her name?
She
I
both.
liked her,
I assume it was like shade for Alyssa, the one.
Oh,
I assume that's what that is.
Yikes!
But she says outright, "Did he do both of these things?" Absolutely. She repeats it after this. She says, "Yeah, he did those things." But a lot of people cheat on their taxes, Vic.
Yeah, you're damn right. I called the code red. Yeah, that's one way. That's one way to go about it, I guess. I'm wondering though, when Hunter did that press conference, do you think, Mary? Well, obviously in The View it worked, but do you think he generally will gain sympathy from doing this?
I don't think so.
I mean, I'd like to not think so, but
and apparently there's, as you would understand there to be, conflict between White House aides and the Biden team, the Hunter Biden team, about whether he should be doing this publicly.
Oh yeah,
it's obviously not a good look for Dad to have him front and center, even though Dad takes him on Air Force One all the time on foreign trips. So
he slept on a cot in Ireland,
and he goes to state dinners. So he's been front and center in that way. They don't necessarily want him speaking publicly.
No, especially after the charges. From,
and he also, Karine Jean-Pierre was asked, like, hey, you guys always talk about what a loving father he is. Peter Doocy asked, what a loving father he is and how much influence he has on him. Did he know that he was going to skip out on this subpoena today? And she seemed to imply that he did know he was going to, and that he was going to speak out. And he's very proud of his son. Yeah.
When I was listening to him, all I can think, and saying how he's a victim, and everything is very unfair, and obviously covering for his father, that this is all him. He doesn't actually say what it is that he's, he thinks he might have done or not. But all I can think of was the Harvey Weinstein apology. Do you remember after all the charges and the allegations had come out?
Yeah.
And he, with a lot of PRL help, a lot of good it did him, crafted that letter that said, I understand about these charges and I really feel bad, but, I'm going to turn things around and continue my fight against the National Rifle Association.
Yes.
And as my mother told me, and it's like, really?
Yeah.
It didn't work. And
the gun control one was a nice read.
Yeah. Just in case, like dogs and squirrels, just mention that and change the subject, So, and then there's the impeachment itself of his father. Now, this is as a result of this Hunter Biden business, and the more complicated and the worse it looks for Joe, because they move the goalposts. So before it was, we're flat out, full stop. Biden had said during the campaign trail, don't know anything about my son's business.
Never spoke to him
Never
about it.
discussed it. And now we have, I don't know, 20 times at least that he's met with Hunter Associates. Yes, but we didn't talk about the business.
Right.
Maybe talked about the weather. So as a result, as we said earlier on this episode, now the House has actually formally passed this inquiry into the impeachment. They're not voting on impeachment, but it's now official. They are looking into possible impeachment of the president. So, but again, on the other side, they're completely skeptical. They say there's no there. And I believe, Mary Katharine, that the threshold for the Democrats is you have to produce a check that has the communist, the CCP on the letterhead. And, and then on the memo line, it says bribery.
Right.
Anything short of that.
Bribe for Joseph R. Biden.
It has to be. Otherwise, don't see it.
No, it's true. So Hunter himself said that there's no fairness or decency in GOP efforts to connect his foreign business dealings to an impeachment inquiry into his father. Speaking of shameless, by the way, one of his quotes from this event is that he's proud of the global business partners he's made over the years.
Well, he's owning that.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
He can set up his new office in Beijing.
But the thing that's sad about it is that, I would say have some shame, except having shame actually hurts you politically. I think it's wiser. I don't think it's moral, but I think it's wiser strategically. This is like what's been going on for several years now, is that doubling, tripling down on everything is the way you get out of it faster.
Be unrepentant.
Yes.
Yeah. It's never worked out where somebody who has apologized for this is then, come out better, except for their soul. But who needs that?
This is Washington.
Yeah, this is Washington. No, it's just funny because, the threshold for the Democrats when it came to impeaching Trump the first time, I'm not talking about January 6th. It's an entirely different, terrible issue. But the first time over the collusion with Russia, I just felt like, I don't know, maybe the threshold was somewhat lower.
Well, I mean, if you use the standard of evidence that we used for Russiagate, which was terrible and bad and wrong and resulted in 4 years of incorrect news stories.
Yeah.
You could pin a lot of stuff on Biden, right? It's the standards are completely different than they were for that story. And that really bugs me because it seems so obvious to me. But this is the new thing. Not the new thing, the newish thing where we just lie to people's faces and we're proud of it. The other thing that the Biden administration, by the way, is, and a lot of liberal pundits in the past 2 days have been just lying to people's faces about, is inflation. There's this whole argument going on online on Twitter where it's like, stop talking about your grocery bills, people. It's not real. Your wages are keeping pace. And it's like, y'all, I promise you this is not a good strategy. Doing an impeachment inquiry also might not be a good political strategy for telling the American people you're dealing with their real issues, but I know that telling them their groceries are cheap is not the way to do it.
People know better for themselves, and they can make that decision when they go in and they decide to buy, I don't know, their eggs or all your basics and realize how much more expensive things are. I know, what's crazy? As you know, I am a gout sufferer, and one way that I fight it is by drinking cherry juice. And just regular pure tart cherry juice at the supermarket is now anywhere between $9 and $14.
Ooh.
For it's not a giant jug either, and it's pure. Look, granted, I drink them in amounts like shots because it's tart. You don't want to drink the whole thing, but that for me was the gauge of, wait a minute, who's paying $12 or whatever for Knudson's cherry juice?
Yeah, and my metric has always been, look, we live in a high cost area. This is a high cost of living area. Sure. But the incomes in the DC area are often commensurate with the fact that it is a higher cost area. And so I acknowledge that my family, even though we have a high cost area, even though we have four kids, likely does better than the vast majority of Americans on paper. And if I'm feeling it, they are feeling it. And I started to feel it 1.5 years ago. Yeah. In very serious ways and in very noticeable ways. And to tell people that it's not real is just wild to me.
I find that to be the worst strategy.
Yeah.
Because they probably know better for themselves. But that's generally the attitude of we know better than you. So.
Yeah. You know who thinks they know better than Joe Biden, Vic?
Who would that be?
The staffers at the White House.
Oh, right.
So we've got the anonymous interns signing letters. We've got staffers in the State Department signing letters. Now we've got staffers outside the White House lighting candles for a ceasefire. Many of them are masked. They don't announce themselves or their current jobs because they want to keep their current jobs. And I would suggest that if you feel so passionately about this, perhaps you should not be serving this administration.
Yeah.
But we do not have the courage of our convictions.
No, they want it both ways. They want that job. They like having their, what is their thrifts, their TSPs. They got to keep their TSPs, their thrift savings plans. And in any event, they would actually hate to be without the job, but they feel very strong. Again, they're like this fifth column or a rear guard. This is a masked vigil by dozens in the White House. And you throw into this the other anonymous petitions from the Biden State Department against their own bosses.
Yeah.
Even under the 4 years of Trump, I don't think Trump ever had to deal with workers who say, I object to you for X policy.
No.
You know,
they did it a little bit more secretly. They certainly objected at times, but they did it a little more subtly than this. I do think this speaks to a sort of entitlement on the left, and they're enamored with protest culture in general. So they're just like, this is what we do, except that's not what you do when you're working for an administration.
Protesters won, but they don't realize it.
It cracks me up that, by the way, the left is like, yeah, put your name all over this tax fraud and gun crimes and just double down, and your racist Christmas party, just tell people that that's awesome. But when it comes to things that arguably they're making a moral argument about, they won't put their name on it.
No, and let me put a kafia on and say it's in solidarity, but when in fact I just don't want them to see my face.
Yeah,
you know, and that's only part of it, as I'm sure you're going to point out about the vice president too.
Oh yeah, no, she's part of the rear guard. So Vice President Kamala Harris, this is Politico reporting, has been telling colleagues in the administration that she wants the White House to show more concern publicly for the humanitarian damage in Gaza, where Israel is locked in a bloody and prolonged battle with Hamas, according to 3 people familiar with Harris's comments. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. Look, I think this is another flailing attempt by the Kamala team to try to find some purchase for this remarkably unskilled vice president. This is actually a more sympathetic issue for the left's activist base. This one might sort of hit
at the expense of other perhaps Jewish Democrats.
Right.
So I can't have it both ways.
Yeah. So that might hit some good notes for them, but like I just think this is all, none of it's really planned. Her staff changes all the time. They're always sort of like, it feels like they're just sort of lashing out occasionally with like, here's another thing that Kamala's trying.
Right. And she's, I don't know if they gave her the go ahead to just say this, or if she was just, that was all off the cuff. This is when she was in Dubai, but they are caught in this bind because again, you have your traditional Democrats like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, for example, and Jewish Democrats who are on the side of Israel, Chuck Schumer for that matter. And then on the other side, you have the squad. Bernie Sanders is now demanding that we cut back military aid to Israel by $10 billion, right? Oof. And I just saw in the news, the Biden administration, they're holding back giving Israel something like 27,000 M4 and M16 rifles because they're afraid it's going to fall in the hands of settlers, and they'll use them against Palestinians in the West Bank. So,
except here we are sending trucks of aid on which Hamas gunmen are sitting as they roll into Gaza, and that's fine.
But that's fine. And then you have this other instance of the Ohio Congressman Max Miller, and he was with a reporter, Ali Vitali from NBC, and then some staffer just went up to his face and said, "Free Palestine." I mean, there's a problem. And
here's what I think about them, like both on the Hill, in the White House, and I would say this if it were a Republican president, but the Republicans would have fewer problems with this because there is less of this sort of protest culture embrace.
Much less.
Same with colleges, same with the White House, same with the Hill. Nip this in the bud unless you want chaos to increase.
Yeah, it'll just fester.
Once the interns know that they can run the place, that they can, for instance, like on college campuses, occupy buildings, or that they can make their bosses do things, they will continue to demand that, and you will have some really bad and escalating norms, new norms on the Hill and at the White House. So I say, I believe it was was it Brown University, I think,
Yeah.
arrested a bunch of kids, had a bunch of kids arrested. Kids, I say kids, they're adults, but they act like children. Had a bunch of students arrested for occupying a building, as they should. You
Yeah. They booked them right there on the spot.
Yeah. Don't punish college students for speech, even outrageous speech. Punish them for the things that are actually non-speech and violate all your rules, right? That's the easy step. Take that step first. Same with the White House, same with the Hill. Here is Kamala Harris, since we are, as you know, big fans, she's talking with the Polish president in Warsaw, and this is just one of her answers.
The newly elected.
It's beautiful. Ready?
We all watched the television coverage of just yesterday. That's on top of everything else that we know and don't know yet, based on what we've just been able to see. And because we've seen it or not doesn't mean it hasn't happened. But just limited to what we have seen.
There you go, Vic.
Wait a minute. What is she talking about?
It doesn't matter.
Oh,
it doesn't matter because it doesn't make any sense. And it's a beautiful, perfect Kamala Harris clip.
We say this all the time, but if you were a screenwriter for Veep and you came up with this line, they'd say, okay, that's pushing it. No one would actually say this, you know?
She is pretty amazing in that sense.
I just wanted to say the Biden problem is how they want it both ways really quickly on Israel is he's trying to thread that needle. On the one hand, it would be great for Israel to eliminate Hamas, then problem solved. But he would love for Israel to eliminate Hamas on his timetable, which is this weekend. If you could just finish it by this weekend, we'll be great. And that's not
one of the heads of the sort of the equivalent of the cabinet and the close-knit group that makes the decisions about the war, I can't remember who it was speaking to the French president and said this is going to take several months. So they're sending the message that this ain't going to be over anytime soon.
At best. All right. You asked what we needed to talk about Virginia sports.
Oh, that's
how many professional teams does Virginia have?
We're going to have two. We're going to have two, Vic. Okay. Your mileage may vary on whether you care to have two professional
it depends on where they're located. It really matters to you.
The Capitals and the Wizards. The Wizards are the NBA franchise. The Capitals, the hockey franchise in
Stanley
Washington. They play in the middle of Chinatown in what used to be the MCI Center. Now is the Verizon Center now, or is
the
it
Cap Center now, right? The Capital One Arena.
Capital One Arena now. Now this is interesting because first of all, a little bit of history on Gallery Place in Chinatown, which is that area of town. It was a real disaster until that arena existed.
Yes.
And things really turned around. It used to be full of like rundown townhomes that
we
no one would want to live in.
Yes. We used to call it, when I was in college, we called it China Block because it was such a very small community. But you'd go there for really good Chinese food at Mr. Young's. There was another place called Gullo's. And of course, the very famous Tony Chang's. But you had to go in and out. You can't hang out on that street.
Right. And like, if you were to, I remember hearing a story from a friend who in like the early 2000s found a townhome in Chinatown for sale for like $115,000 or something. Because
I hope your friend sold it now.
No, he didn't buy it. And he looked back later and was like, oh.
It's the story of most of our lives.
But it's going the opposite direction now because, so Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin has reached a tentative agreement with the parent company of the NBA's Washington Wizards and NHL's Washington Capitals to move those teams from the District of Columbia to what he called a new visionary sports and entertainment venue in Northern Virginia. The proposal, which would need state legislature approval, calls for the creation of a $2 billion sports and entertainment district south of Washington in Alexandria. This is right outside the city. Now, what's amazing to me about this is, and I keep saying, we have not even begun to reckon with what COVID policies did to American cities and the surrounding areas to some extent. Virginia, even under Northam, who was the Democratic governor before Youngkin, stayed quite a bit more open in areas than Washington did during COVID. So
the shutdown was horrendous.
What's remarkable about American cities, Washington in particular, is like they basically committed suicide during 2020. They were like, you know what? We don't want any workers down here, even though that pays all the bills and keeps all the restaurants open and is a large part of the tax base. We don't want any of the restaurants to be open, which is the whole draw for living here at a great expense.
Oh, we're going to pose insane rules on your ability to operate during this time.
So they did all these things on purpose. And then there were the protests and yes, riots that happened in June 2020,
Yep.
and for which people weren't correctly punished,
Mhm.
and nobody got the message that they weren't supposed to do those crimes. And then just like a general loosening of law enforcement in the city. And in the end, what happens is that people don't want to go to these games anymore because it's more dangerous to go to the
Yeah.
games. If you take kids down there, even if there's a threat, you will probably see some drug use. You will probably have to walk by
Yeah.
a tent city or two. It's going to be a much hairier experience
A
than
colleague
it was a couple years ago.
A colleague tells me just the other day at the metro stop, might have been Gallery Place, Chinatown, there's just a bunch of guys who are just hanging out along the wall and they're ready to deal drugs.
Yeah.
They're just there. And you have some very, not well people who are homeless and ill and doing all sorts of really sort of terrible things directly across from the Capital One arena, according to another eyewitness I spoke with. Yeah, it's not great. Now, Ted Leonsis, who of course is the great, the owner of the Washington Wizards and the Capitals, he was very kind in saying that he had a vision for this complex that is not only sports, but apparently a music hall too. And Virginia offered the space for him to fulfill that vision. Okay, so and obviously the city does not have the space, but it just doesn't help when violent crime is up 40%, right?
Yes.
Homicides are up 34%. The city council, the DC City Council is on another planet. So they lowered the penalty for carjackings. And now up to now, which the year is not even over yet, we have 932 carjackings this year.
I mean,
Who
they
needs
send
this?
out instructions for how to drive through DC as if it were
brace
a
yourself.
State Department alert for if you're like traveling to
Beirut
somewhere that is controlled by a drug cartel. I mean, that's what it
right.
sounds like.
Yeah.
But it's what's remarkable to me also is that, look, all of American cities did a lot of this to themselves.
Mhm.
Seattle, Portland,
LA.
LA, Chicago, right? And Muriel Bowser, in a clip that we played last week, sort of seemed to be coming to the realization
totally.
that this has gone too far. But it's very hard to claw
It's
this
too late.
back.
It is.
And what's more remarkable about Bowser, who I believe is in her third term as mayor.
Yes, third term.
What's more remarkable about Bowser than even the other cities and their mayors is that you have an economy that is the size of a medium country's, right?
Right there.
Right here in your city. It can't leave.
Yeah.
Not only can it not leave DC, it is fueled by taxpayer dollars, which means it runs in perpetuity.
Yes.
Insulated from the economy.
Right.
Insulated from bad business decisions. It has no need to survive with good ideas or innovation or serving people because it's just the government, okay? And all the people attached to it. And you took that and you still managed to chase most of that economy 3 miles across a bridge.
Yeah. I mean, again, as you mentioned, most of government has not come back to work.
No.
A lot of them are remote. The last time I was in the city, which was maybe last week, my Uber driver is pointing out all the many buildings that have leasing signs on them, open for lease. A lot of people have never come back. In some of the offices I know where I visit some of our friends, on the same floor or other offices that they've never seen anybody be in there, go in there ever. So, I mean, and meanwhile, Glenn Youngkin, who is, the big winner in all this, not only is he bringing jobs, it's like a $2 billion project, but they estimate over the next, decades or so, something like 12 billion. I mean, it's going to be huge, and you don't have to cross the bridge for us. And there's going to probably be more restaurants. On the other hand, Mary Katharine, there's things like traffic. And I want to know, how do you feel about this?
I mean, I'm pretty skeptical in general of making deals for sports arenas because any money that you're dumping into that, look, I'm on the fence about it because my libertarian side says don't give any government money to this because
tax credits and such.
Sports guys can take care of themselves and they have a lot of money.
Right.
And why are we doing that? However, I have lived in a city or two where the creation of an arena does create a situation where
Right.
the neighborhood around it becomes revitalized, where you have a lot more that is on offer to the city, to the people of the city. So look, this is going to go in Potomac Yard, which I don't want to get too local for people, is right outside of DC. I used to live in that area. It is pretty bottlenecked in there. So
Yeah, it goes straight down Route 1, and I still haven't quite figured out where exactly are they going to have this, next to Potomac Yards, like next to the Target, behind it? I mean, it's
I don't know.
yeah, it's and don't forget HQ, Amazon HQ is there too. HQ2 is there.
I mean, they could just take down all of
Yeah.
Crystal City, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, just give them Crystal City.
At any rate, it's going to be, it will
It's gonna
be,
be something.
the traffic will be a serious issue that they're going to have to figure out.
Mm.
So I'm kind of on the fence about it in that way, but I do think, and I really don't want Washington, D.C. to fail as a city.
No, and I'm happy that the Nats are still going to be there, but
Yeah.
Navy Yard is not downtown, so I mean that's a whole other thing. You know?
But I don't want DC to fail,
Yeah.
but this is just a logical result of many of the policies in place. So
Yeah, it
you
did
can't
not,
sort
did
of,
not help.
you can't be like Muriel Bowser and just be like, okay, we let this get too far, but everybody has to stay here and come back to work and do the things. And it's like, well, we're not subsidizing you with our behavior.
Yeah.
After you've created the situation.
And she also has no control over the various departments, you know, trying to get people to come back to work. You know, that's up to the departments.
This is true, but this
yeah.
this is a deeper issue of the left sort of adopting stay homeism as
Mhm.
their most important signal that you
Yeah,
were doing good, and so it
Yep.
stuck with a lot of people. And look, there was going to be some sort of market correction for corporate real estate in each of these cities, regardless. Like there was just enough work at home and
Mhm.
enough flexibility that people were not going to go back to the thing full time. But you didn't
Right.
have to do the crime stuff. You could have kept enforcing those laws, right?
Yeah. Again, they made it much more harder than it already was.
Yeah. Here's Muriel Bowser, by the way, speaking to this issue, and here's what she chooses to say.
Look, I'm the DC mayor. I'm not a expert on their crime, but that traffic is notorious, so people know about it. And I think, which lines go to that station?
Blue and yellow.
Blue and yellow. So every line goes to Gallery Place, right? Red, blue, orange, and yellow. Yellow and green. Is that right? I think that's right.
That's not right. So her response is the traffic's really bad in Virginia, and our metro has a lot more lines going through it. I don't know which ones they are, even though I've been the mayor for 3 terms.
Also, you know, Metro is in not great shape, and they're about
That's the other thing.
fares. They're closing down some of the stations they think that don't have as many people using it, and the wait times are going to be much longer. So
Yeah. It's the doom loop, and it's real, and it is largely self-imposed.
Yeah.
I don't love it. Oh, we have one more silly thing before we go, right?
yes, you want to talk about?
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Hold on, I'm gonna play a little bit of this clip. This is from Saturday Night Live.
Mhm.
It's the cold open, and it's about the college presidents testifying on the Hill. This will be
Right,
fun.
which is great
We'll
because
make
we
fun
all
of-
know how horrible they did. They did so terrible.
They were terrible.
They were terrible.
You're watching C-SPAN. Later, is Taylor Swift now dating Marco Rubio? But first, testimony from 3 university presidents on the subject of anti-Semitism on college campuses.
Order, please, thank you. We're joined today by the heads of 3 of our most esteemed universities, the president of MIT, Sally Kornbluth.
I've never been more afraid to be anywhere.
The president of UPenn, Elizabeth McGill.
Can I just resign now?
Not yet. And the president of Harvard, Dr. Claudine Gay.
Thank you.
Dr. Gay, would you like to do a quick joke about your name to get it out of the way?
I would. Dr. Gay sounds like a Molly dealer on Fire Island.
Thank you. Now, I'll turn it over to MAGA superstar Elise Stefanik from New York, who's been pacing the hallways listening to Lose Yourself by Eminem. Miss Stefanik.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Now, I'm going to start screaming questions at these women like I'm Billy Eichner. Anti-Semitism, yay or nay?
I'm sorry, what?
Yes or no is calling for the genocide of Jews against the Code of Conduct for Harvard.
Well, it depends on the context.
What? That can't be your answer, you pen lady. Same question, yes or no?
Well, we are serious about stopping all forms of hatred, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia.
And then the second one, and my tea lady, chance to steal. And keep in mind, if you don't say yes, you're gonna make me look good, which is really, really hard to do. So I'll ask you straight up, do you think genocide is bad?
Could I submit an answer in writing at a later date?
Am I winning this hearing? Somebody pinch me.
Republicans pounce, Vic.
It's a little, okay, fine. So it wasn't as, I was expecting it to be, my expectations were much lower, believe it or not. So I'm actually surprised they didn't make them out to be that great. And nevertheless, it's.
Elise is definitely the villain. So we got that going.
And shrill. So on the one hand, it's, part of it's surprising because if you watch the hearings, you would think that the emphasis, the performance of these presidents, and they do make fun of them a little bit, but not quite, clearly not to the extent that they're making fun of Elise Stefanik, who is obviously worked up about it. On the other hand, I'm not really surprised. I mean, you think about the writers who are there now. You think about, I don't know, the cold open after the 2016 election when Kate McKinnon was
yes.
dressed as Hillary Clinton and playing Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. And they were all probably crying on the side, and I don't mean that as I'm serious. I'm sure they were crying at that time.
No, that was, you're right. It was better than that. And I didn't mind the Dr. Gay joke. I thought it was sort of funny. I chuckled a little bit. I will say the House engaged in a bit of a cell phone from my point of view after that hearing when it passed a bipartisan resolution Wednesday calling for the resignation of Harvard President Claudine Gay in light of her controversial congressional testimony on campus anti-Semitism last week. It passed by a lot. It was 303-126 for requesting the resignation of MIT President Sally Kornbluth and Gay. McGill has already stepped down. It's not Congress's job to fire people from private universities, and they shouldn't. Yeah, they shouldn't get involved in that, especially if you want to argue that the universities should be pro free speech, which I do.
Yeah.
So
I don't want to be one of these. I thought the skit is weak, but there is a lot of weak skits lately. I think that I don't want to be these people who will say it hasn't been good since the 90s, because a lot of people do say that. You see that, I have stopped watching since whatever. But I remember when I was in high school, my English teacher, Mr. Sunday, would say, it's the 70s. That was the best Saturday Night Live. This Phil Hartman, I guess he's okay, or whatever. And of course, for us, I mean, this is classic. So I'm not going to be that. And I will acknowledge, I mean, there's some great skits. I think Black Jeopardy with Tom Hanks is one of the funniest things ever been done. And the writing is very smart in a very long time. So here's my theory is the writers now, they get so excited about having these celebrity cameos that they just rely on their mere presence to carry the skit. And they don't actually do a lot of effort in terms of making the writing funny. So a lot of it is look, it's Robert De Niro as Robert Mueller. Isn't that funny? Or Alec Baldwin. I don't know. Alec Baldwin is Donald Trump. I don't know about that one anymore. And they do a lot of SNL shorts, right? And they're very slick and they can be very funny too, but it's not live,
Right. I was raised on 70s SNL and I think it was great. My parents actually remember watching the first SNL live.
Wow.
And so we watched that when we were kids.
It's an entirely
it wasn't
different
live.
animal.
It wasn't live, but it was in replays on other stations. So we would watch that. But there was a great episode with Nate Bargatze maybe a month ago.
Okay.
And he's a stand-up. Actually, he's from Nashville. Does clean comedy, but he's an exploding in popularity. And they had at least one great skit, which is the George Washington one. You should look it up and watch it if you
I saw that. Yeah.
It's fantastic. So, there are gems here and there.
It is. What is weird is I cannot possibly imagine though that with the current cast or the cast of the last, 10 years or so, that you would have as many conservatives on the show as you did when you look back in the 90s. And maybe they weren't as conservative as they later on became, certainly that's the case with some of them. But Dana Carvey, Adam Sandler, Dennis Miller, Victoria Jackson, who went way out on the right. And not to mention now, our very staunch pro-Israel defenders like Rob Schneider and John Lovitz. It was a different time.
Yeah.
So that's it.
We got the 90s folks wrapped up.
We do. I know. Now, you know what's a great one for the Christmas holidays is the different ending for "It's a Wonderful Life." Have you ever seen that one?
I'll have to look it up. I remember this.
Yes,
movie.
and you know, and Dana Carvey, of course, plays George Bailey. Old Man Potter's John Lovitz in the wheelchair, and in fact, the brother that comes home is played by Dennis Miller. It's very good. It's
Love
very
it.
good. Okay, Mary Katharine, you made it.
I did.
You didn't think you were going to make it
because it's getting worse.
Yes. Okay, good. Well, let me wrap things up by just saying thank you to many listeners, multiple listeners who told me that I did the right thing when it came to the black ice. So listener Andrew, I don't have his last name. He said, quote, assuming you were driving a car with four-wheel ABS, pretty much any car built since the 90s, so that would count as my Subaru legacy. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. Stomp on the brake pedal and keep it pinned until the car stops. Pumping the brakes is only relevant to cars without anti-lock brakes, which is basically your classic antique cars at this point. Aaron Cromar, he credits my Subaru. And Greg Zawicki says in part, quote, continuous application of your anti-lock brakes, enabled brakes was exactly the right thing to do. They pumped themselves out.
Yeah. See, this is the problem, Vic. We're like a bridge generation where both of us have car knowledge from before they modernized cars.
Before ABS, yeah.
Stuck in there.
That's true. No, they taught you. Pump that brake. Okay. That wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube, and you can follow me on Twitter at Victorina Matus.
I'm at MKHammer on Twitter, at MKHammerTime on Instagram. You can follow the show at Getting Hammered Podcast, and you should. Thanks for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media Podcast.